YOLO, mofos. Hopefully, you guys can hear me. I'm not sure. I had some wires crossed just now, and I don't even know. Gilgamesh, what's up? What's going on? So, we're waiting for the David Dubine call. Allegedly for some mini Ice Age conversations about the Ice Age. That's coming in, it seems like. I mean, it's kind of cold in places. Yes, we can hear you clear. Thank you very much. Thank you. Let's see. Let me make sure I got everything in a row here. Awesome. And I should be getting called any minute. What's going on, James? John Johnson? Raven Wolf. Corey, living in left field. Simon, how's it going? I think I'm going to like that over there too. And I'm going to pop this chat out so I can look at it while I'm doing other stuff. There we go. It's a whiskey and weed evening. All right. Everybody likes whiskey and weed. Let's see what's going on over here with my control mechanisms. Hello. All right. Now we got our first of articles here. Sweet. And now we got dogs barking. Copy that. Put that right over here. Yes, yes. Who am I talking to? I'm talking to myself. I'm just joking. There we go. Now I can see you guys. I have multiple screens going, confusing me. How's it going, Tammy Ratfield? Reading slips is harder to navigate lately. Doesn't sound like we have a connection.
And good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I didn't really hear the intro come in, so I'll just start right now at the top of the hour. Thanks for joining tonight. I'm here with Ransom Godwin from 420.
Yo.
And myself, David Dubine. And let's give a try. Are we here? Ransom, good evening.
How's it going, David?
All right. Yeah, I didn't hear the intro at the top of the hour. I was waiting for it to finish. Perhaps it was a silent one. I was trying to judge the time here. Yeah, thank you for everybody joining in tonight who's listening to Ransom Godwin from 420 TV, Freedomist Films, and myself here, David Dubine from Adapt 2030. You know, this week's been a stellar week of changes in terms of earth changes. And then on top of that, the economic changes today, right at 3 p.m., massive disruptions in the market where they required everybody to have full margin top up for moving into the 3 p.m. close today, which was strange. They haven't done that since 2008. So you got to ask yourself, what's going on? But for me, looking at the beautiful stars tonight, it's been absolutely breathtakingly clear for the last couple of days. And as we move into the springtime, how many of you are getting ready for this planting season? Because everywhere you look on the horizon, it seems that we're going to need to be more self-sufficient as we progress down this timeline through 2020. So the more you can get self-sufficient, the better, and in quick fashion. And I don't know, Ransom, what do you think about that? I mean, what kind of changes are you seeing through the week? These massive, and the USGS did it again. It registered initially as 8.1 quake off of New Zealand, and quickly was downgraded to a 7.9, and then it was a 7.8. And it just seems that the Earth changes are here. The what do you call that? Space hurricane above the poles that they've seen for the first time ever. I mean, there's a lot of things that are starting to uptick. The lightning staying glow mode now for seconds after lightning strikes in the sky. There's a lot of things are happening that are just moving along the timeline of mass change coming in. So what are you seeing? What's on the radar?
Oh, well, I don't know, man. You were talking. I've been looking through all of these articles like for the last 2 weeks, and you bring up mud floods and stuff, and I'm seeing these places that the highways are washed out, and then we're having swarms of earthquakes everywhere. And I keep it's funny to me because every other day they find a new archaeology discovery in Pompeii and Mount Vesuvius and stuff like that. And I keep thinking, is that going to be us in a few years, like in 100 years, where they're, checking out our culture by looking at a Ford Fiesta under a bunch of ash or something like that. But to your other point, though, I've been getting ready for farming. I can't wait this year. I'm going to try to, multiply my output. Last year, I did a minimal effort garden experiment, and it turned out way better than I thought. We had super amounts of food all year: squash, carrots, onions, etc. This year I'm concentrating more on staples, potatoes, and stuff like that that'll still be around next winter.
Yeah, that's a good one, and to change the mind frame of when something's abundant during the harvest season or through the year. For example, pumpkins. I love pumpkins. It's one of my favorites. And, those are pretty easy to store for 3, 4, 5 months if you keep them in a cool environment and put some, so I'm trying to think about just going to Lowe's or whatever, Home Depot, and buying some shelving with a space between it, and then getting some sort of fabric there, like jute fabric or something like that, to be able to, even some straw, and put it in there to be able to preserve those pumpkins. Because I've seen people with some really good root cellar style stuff here in Tennessee, where they've been able to keep the pumpkins the entire winter. Like they'll buy 150 pumpkins, back in around Halloween time, and they still have some left over. And what is it now, March? And they still have pumpkins, and they look like they were picked out of the field yesterday.
Yeah.
So, thinking about the things that come in season that you can dehydrate. If you have any dehydrators, you could freeze dry it if you have one of those, but those machines are a little expensive. Or can it, or whatever you do to it, just put it up. And we're going to have to start thinking about that, of abundance during the season and storing it, and thinking like your grandparents, because all signs for me are food prices are going to increase to the rocket ship moon here. I mean, just in short order, we're going to go to rocket ship prices, along with fuel and food. I mean, those are two things that once these prices rise up, I mean, it puts a huge dent into your lifestyle.
Another thing is I've been actually doing that, trying to think like my grandparents, and in the way that storing stuff. And I've discovered some cool stuff just trying to start farming. One of them is things like melons. You buy them from the store, and if you don't eat them within a week or so, you get kind of upset because they get soft, they get gross. However, I grew my own, and we kept them inside, and there were melons all the way into the late January just sitting in our fruit bowl that were still solid, barely ripening, that I pulled off the plants at the end of the year. And then the amazing amount of time that my tomatoes stayed without me doing any real precaution. Some people wrap them in a newspaper and put them in the closet, the green ones, and then you can unwrap them and slowly ripen them all winter long. And I was learning the other day about oiling eggs, and a friend and also some other people that I saw were trying to do this same thing, and they kept failing because people don't realize how long their food is in transit before they get the food actually to their house. basically you're getting rotten food from the grocery store already. It's already got a shelf life, and that shelf life is just about over due to just in time shipping processes with the food. So when you get eggs from a chicken and or from your neighbor or wherever you're getting them from, you can oil those eggs as soon as you get them and just put them on the shelf at room temperature, and you have a 9 month stash of protein that's not going to go bad. But I noticed people were trying to do the same thing with store bought eggs, not realizing they're already 9 months old. So you can't do that with them. It's hard to store stuff from the grocery store, which is either on purpose or just a product of just in time shipping. Either way, it doesn't work out for people trying to prep through the box stores. Really, the only way to prep is through organic means or through local means so that you get the food when it's new, and then you have the time to preserve it, and you also have the natural shelf life of it working to your advantage.
Yeah, let me touch on the eggs there for a second. Living out here in the countryside now, I have been able to find a couple families who have extra chickens, and they sell the eggs on the side. And even 6 months ago, you could get a dozen eggs for like $1.50. Well, the price is pretty much the same. I think it's $1.75 now or $2 because their price has also gone up. But what I noticed about the eggs is they don't wash them when they give them to you. So you're getting them straight out of the coop, straight into you. You got to bring your own container, obviously.
Yeah.
But did you notice the ones in the store, they're completely washed off of that coating that you're talking about, that then you can preserve those for such a long time. And I've also seen some old timers using, I think it was lime in the water, and then putting them in a water bath and then keeping in one of those like mason jugs there, submerged in the water, in the lime water, and the same thing. They didn't have to boil them. They were able to keep them in the liquid form using lime water. And that coating that they wash off the eggs is the thing you're talking about that gives you that extra really long shelf life. So I'm going to say absolutely it is a plan to limit the amount of food that you can store so you're always in that replenishment mode. Because, see, my mom's really such a stickler about the go-by date, or the dates that they put on the cans, right? Yeah. Or they put on the bags. Like, she'll throw something away, and you can obviously look at it and see it is still 100% edible, and it's 100% solidly good to eat. And she'll say, well, it's 1 week over this. And we're like, it's Parmesan cheese, really? And well, look, the date's over that, or even 2 weeks for Parmesan cheese. And I'm like, you know what? They aged Parmesan cheese for like 5 years, 10 years. You got to pay a premium if you get 10-year aged Parmesan cheese, right? And like, well, it says 3 weeks over the date. But when I was at university, that was one of the classes in the advertising that I took, was that good by date, sell by date, and best by date. They're all three different things, but they confuse people a lot. That was only started in the 1970s to get you to consume more, because they knew in the future at least 15% of the people would do just like my mom does. She looks at the date and is like, oh, it's old, we got to throw it away and get a new one. Because I almost shook my head. I was at the house like a couple months ago, and she was looking at some vinegar. She's like, oh, the vinegar's old, it's out of date. And I said, oh, the vinegar, come on, you can keep that for 1,000 years. Like, just the general knowledge of the foods too. Like honey, they put good by dates on honey, but they find honey that was used as storage for magic mushrooms in the Hittite society from 5,000 years ago, and whatever was preserved in honey is just as good today as it was 5,000 years ago. So to insult people by putting a good by date on honey or a best by date, it's crazy. It's just this whole just-in-time delivery, rotation of consumption, and oh no, it's an existential threat to global warming, yet hey, buy a new car, buy a new house, buy the new suit, buy the new electronic appliance, buy this, buy that, hey, we can get it to you, just it's an existential threat. So this whole mixed messaging that we get in society of your life's going to end because it's CO2, and then there's 50,000 advertisements on to buy new stuff, get a new battery, get a new light, get a new this, get a new that, you need a new fridge, you need all this stuff. But then in the very next thing, like, oh, we need to raise your taxes, and everybody needs to stop driving because of global warming. And it's just a whole farce of a society and show that we're looking at right in front of it. Everything's so fictitious, focused on the food. You hit it on the head there, Ransom. That's such a perfect observation about the supermarkets.
Yeah, and we've been doing experiments because my grandmother just passed away recently, and I got my inheritance was a bunch of already out of date food that was like, my grandma was still storing it, thinking, well, that's good, you know. And then we get it, and a lot of it is good, but then some of it's not. Like, the tomatoey things usually are still good. And then when you get into the acidic things like fruit and other things like that, you find out that you start tasting the can. It starts getting that liner off, that BPA liner that they put in all the cans. So, a long time ago when they canned food, it really would last decades, probably past the expiration date. But the way that they're doing it now, it seems like they're not putting as much effort into actual, safety and longevity of the product. And it's exactly like you said. Actually, I worked a lot in the grocery store industry when I was young. And the meat that you get at the store is also done in the same way, where by the time that the butcher gets it, if you still have a butcher, because most of it's mechanically separated now from plants, but if you still have butchers, by the time they're cutting into it, it's mostly rotten. And believe me, I was a butcher for 10 years. It's and then some of the other things that goes on there. So if you have a real meat source, like a farmer friend or a rancher friend, that's actual protein. And the eggs, you want to get it from people that are growing it in the right way, because if you've ever seen the inside of a chicken house, it's like another planet. It's like walking into Venus or something. The amount of ammonia in the air and stuff. I don't know how actually those birds live in that, but evidently they've been kind of bred and maybe even genetically modified to handle another environment. And they don't even feed them real food in there. They feed them like different powders with different proteins and vitamins and growth hormones in it. So it's like a bizarre, science fiction movie. A lot of people work in chicken houses, so they know what I'm talking about. I went in there one time to fix a wall and dropped some nails out of my bag, and then within seconds, those chickens had devoured every last piece of metal that I dropped on the floor. It, the whole idea of commercial food, when you really get into it, is completely disgusting, and in my opinion, is slightly designed for, or maybe by accident, because I don't want to put any conspiracy theories out there, but it seems like the industry now is not designed for the longevity or of you or the product. It's meant to go bad fast. It's meant to go bad as soon as you get it, so that exactly what you said, you'll go out and buy more, even if you don't even use it. How many people end up buying stuff and then they end up replacing it because it got old? But like my grandma would not do that because she trusted the old can. She knew that a long time ago the can would last quite some time after its expiration date.
Yeah, and you brought back a memory when I was a kid, because my grandparents, they had land up in Ohio, and I remember when they said, "Hey, do you want to go to our friend's house?" Because they were raising pigs, and I'd never been in, like, I wouldn't say commercial at that point, but I think they had about 200 pigs. I'd never been in a house like when I walk in, that ammonia smell, I can remember that it's almost like my nose seized up right when you were telling that story, because I'd never been, in a place where there'd been hundreds and hundreds of pigs. So chickens and pigs, same thing. I mean, there's an enormous amount of ammonia in there, try to vent that stuff out. And it was in the winter, so it was really closed up, and like, just knocks you off your feet. That smell, it's unbelievable.
Smells like money to some people though.
It is. And, I'll say a great thing, the butcher there, I had this it's crazy you're talking about that, because I was having a conversation with my closest neighbor, because myself and my brother-in-law, and she wanted to get half a cow, and she's like, it's a little much for me because it's about 600 pounds of meat. I was like, okay, well, we can go to the butcher and get it done, because we do know some butchers. But here's the thing, like everything that you're hearing about, so here in East Tennessee, if you want to build a house, it's about 3 years out. The contractors are completely booked up for about 3 years. So you yourself, you could learn all these skills and at least get the rudimentary foundation and put up what could you learn in 3 years in construction? You could build pretty much your own house by that point. But the thing is, they're backed up too. The butchers are completely backed up. Like the deer, the guys who were doing deer early this year during the season, they were so booked up that they just closed their gate and like don't even try to drive up to the place. We're saying no, literally saying no. I even had somebody who said, you know, we got so much extra meat this year. Do you think we could just put it in your freezer? Do you want some deer meat? And I was like, yeah, how much do you have? And they go, oh, 100 pounds. And I'm like, okay, I'll take it. But thinking about that too, because the Amish are selling goat now and sheep, so you're buying, you know, it's live weight when you buy it. So you got to take it to the butcher, and by the time they clean everything out, take the skin off the head. I'm not a fan of boiling the head, but there's somebody here who loves doing the head because a lot of people ate cow tongue when they were growing up. So, you know, to take the skin off the head and get that ready to boil, and then they boil for like, well, let's say between 12 and 16 hours, you know, on slow boil kind of thing. I mean, live weight, when you buy the thing, it's live weight, so you're going to need to butcher it out. And a lot of people aren't ready for that, Ransom. You know what I mean? Following and, you know, following the muscle contours and great. And that's, you know, when you get down into the flesh and the real meat of it, no pun intended, but to actually take that animal when it's dead there right in front of you and then start from scratch on removing the fur, the hooves, the head, all that kind of stuff.
20 minutes.
It's just, more people aren't used to that, you know. So if you're going to buy a live weight animal, I mean, you're going to take it to the butcher, or you're going to do, or what? You know, there's so many possibilities. But coming from the farmer directly, you know, I'd like to hear your experience about, you know, butchering, and then giving some advice here for people who want to get either a half a cow or a full sheep or a full goat. Because right now they were saying, was a 60-pound sheep or $125 right now. Here, this is East Tennessee, but that's live weight. Like, they'll kill it for you, and they'll drain it and do whatever you want with the blood. Either they'll keep it or they'll give it to you, because I know a lot of Asian recipes call for like blood pudding. You know, that's a famous one over in England. Yeah. And a lot of things are used for the blood in different types of recipes and whatnot. So that's about as far as you get with the Amish. Like, they'll kill it, they'll save the blood for you, but then what? Then you have a full animal in front of you. They might de-gut it for you as well, because, you know, there's some specialty items inside there, and they like to save the intestines to make their own sausages and types of things. So it's not like you're going to be wasting a lot of stuff. But, you know, for the average person, I mean, that's so far outside the realm of any possibility of even being sane to do that. Can you imagine, like, Johnny, you know, average person in the neighborhood bringing a whole sheep home and then just start gutting that thing in the backyard? Oh, the people would be calling the police and the animal cruelty thing. Oh my gosh. So tell me a little story, Ransom. What about butchering? Give us some tips here on trying to get some bigger animals so you can split it with your friends and family, and like 5 people going in on 600 pounds of meat, you know, something like this.
Yeah, well, you have a lot of ranchers and stuff that'll do, you know, most of that for you. The problem is that the government gets involved. But in reality, like something from deer size to goat size, anything that you and maybe one other person can hoist with a meat knife, a sharp butcher's knife, you can cut every piece of meat off of that thing, disembowel it, and take the skin off within 20 minutes. It's an easy thing. The problem is most people have never done that. They don't know anatomy. The whole thing's disgusting to them. It stinks. It's gross. There's no telling what you're going to find. And then on top of that, you got the government kind of involved with you. But the truth is, if you're hunting or raising your own stuff and you're only, you know, using it for you and your family, you don't have to worry about the government involvement in the processing issue. So, yeah, I mean, you could watch, there's probably videos on YouTube of somebody skinning and turning it into meat. One time I was donated by the people that hit it, you know, and they called and they reported they hit this deer, and they came in and asked me if I wanted it. And I said, sure. And I hoisted it up, and I was already in the process of having all the meat bagged and everything, and just using a real quick technique to slice the meat at the tendon points. And unfortunately, it comes off like butter. It's flesh is a real easy thing to cut. I know that sounds sick, but it is. And the problem is who knows how to preserve it? If you don't have a refrigerator, all of this work and effort is for naught, because you can't store it or save it, and you have to eat it immediately. So without power generation, the whole problem comes back around to, what do you do in your life literally without electricity or refrigeration? Because that's the Achilles heel of most people in the civilized world today is that they rely on electricity for so many things that they don't really understand how the world works without it. So, everything from napping stone to carving up an animal and skinning it and using the skin, preserving the meat, storing your vegetables. Those are all caveman technologies that I have a feeling everyone needs to relearn at this point in time, in my opinion. I mean, I think it's like a really important thing for people not to just take classes on it, but to do real world, what they call experimental archaeology sometimes, finding out what cavemen did. The good part is we have a 10,000 year head start if we use the acquired knowledge we have access to now, which is disappearing quite fast.
Yeah, and I would say pemmican would be a good one. If nobody knows what pemmican is, you take the meat after it's been dried, and then you can mix it with berries and some other fats, and then it doesn't require refrigeration for storage, and it's a powerhouse. That's one of my things. I want to take some pemmican making recipe classes here, and they have that coming up in May. And I've already decided to join one of the classes to make pemmican. And again, you can use any kind of meat. Well, they don't suggest deer meat too much because it's so lean, but it was more on the beef side. And also the dehydration. It comes back again to the same things I mentioned in the beginning of the show, either using a dehydrator or a freeze dryer. So to get the meat ready for storage before there's a power outage, because, Ransom, I hate to say it, but I really believe during this great reset, they're going to take the power down for days or weeks to make everybody's food spoil in their freezers to do exactly what you said. Because how much meat and protein source is stored in a lot of freezers and refrigerators across North America here? A huge, gigantic, unbelievable amount. So if you were a government and you wanted to starve the people out, what would you do? If you take the electricity down for 2 weeks, probably 80% of the people are going to lose all the meat, all the frozen vegetables, all the frozen fruit that they have stored up, which would probably be hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pounds, which would be enough for a family for 3-4 months. Even if a total grid down situation, that family, provided the power's up and could keep everything refrigerated if you had generators or whatnot, that would be enough for a family to stay well-fed, completely calorie-rich, and fully energized for months and months and months and months, even if it went down for everything else, even if the full food supply stopped. They would be fully fed for months. So, think about how nefarious our governments of the planet are with this reset. They want everybody kowtowing, standing in line at the FEMA gates, and 100% beholden on government. So it would not surprise me at all in any way, shape, or form that they would take out electricity on purpose to starve people who have what you talked about. And I see it too: frozen foods, stored foods. Got to think of way beyond it. Pemmican, dehydration, and freeze drying for meats.
Absolutely. I really feel like, and I'm saying I feel like because of kind of the way that the algorithms work, that we're at a point right now where there are powers out there. So this is my conspiratorial side here. There are powers out there that know exactly what's going on, what cycle we're going in, and they don't want you paying attention to them. So you're getting a taste of organized chaos out there in the world right now. So I have a whole line of articles talking about inflation and just what we talked about, like when we first started talking on this show, and I kept bringing it up a lot about what's going to happen when the COVID payments stop, when everything opens back up. There's going to be millions of properties up that the banks will take back, and that's exactly what's going on right now already. The U.S. I forget which court it is. I think it was the Ninth Circuit or someone ruled that it's okay to kick you out of the house because it's unconstitutional to stop the banks from taking your stuff. You notice how they always cite the Constitution when it is in favor of the banks. But all of these properties are going up. They're talking about superinflation, food shortages, and now we're at the point where we have to learn how to live without electricity, and not only that, circumvent their entire system. They're doing everything that they can on a front, and this is this imaginary enemy I'm talking about that's attacking you. You've heard that phrase out there a bunch, the invisible enemy. Well, there's an invisible enemy that's trying to get all of your inherited wealth if you have any in your family. They want all of your retirement if you've earned any in your lifetime. They want every possible avenue of resources that will help you take care of yourself. And then at the end, they're in control of the food. So they're going to be hiking all of the prices, skyrocketing. But beyond that, this COVID passport, which is going to morph into what is just, you might as well just call it a government permission card. It's going to lose little connection. I mean, it's going to lose its connection to COVID. COVID is just the trigger to, start the program that they've planned for a long time, which is to have you completely chipped, tracked, and every single choice decision that you make has already been kind of made for you on what you're going to choose, how you're going to buy it, where you're going to buy it, when you're going to get to eat it. And like you said, think about these power turnoffs and the fact that it's come out that some of these companies that run these power companies, they planned on turning it off in an Enron style scheme, I'm going to call it, to have power prices go up because people realize the importance of energy in their lives when new extreme temperatures are moving into where they live, where they're not really used to dealing with it. Even though these temperatures have been around on other cycles, kind of the public wasn't informed of that. So they just thought things were going to keep going the way they were forever. Rolling power outages, another thing we were talking about. Everybody's been talking about that. They started it in California. They did it in Texas. And recently I drove by in freezing temperatures in the low single digits and rolled by those windmills in New Mexico that were cranking along just fine in the cold weather with the ice and the sub-zero temperatures. So for my opinion, what it's worth, I think that all of that was, went along with their already planned power outage, and get used to it. And every time that happens, everything warms up right afterwards, and then you have to go buy new faucets and new plumbing and new food and all of this stuff. That's another angle to completely bankrupt you as a citizen that's independent and the ability to be self-sufficient, which a lot of people still have and are taking it for granted right now, that you have the resources now before our country's totally poverty-stricken, to turn things around on not a local level, but on a personal level with you and your property and your lifestyle, and get rid of the idea of being attached to the internet and power as an answer for everything.
Hey, you brought up a good point there. This confiscation of the land, and I would call it wave one, what you described, where everything has been put off. Landlords were not able to pay on their notes or their mortgages either because their tenants didn't pay, especially if you had like a 10-door unit, a 20-door unit, maybe 80 doors there on your unit size, or 80 apartments in there. They call it like 80, how many doors you have. If you ever watch Grant Cardone, who is a good motivational guy, if you're thinking about trying to start your morning right to focus your day, you can get in a whole bunch of motivational speakers. Gary Vaynerchuk, Grant Cardone. There's a few others out there, but he's super into real estate and always talking about 80 doors, man. You want nothing less than 120 doors. And those people are not going to be able to haven't been able to make their mortgage payments. So imagine when it comes and all these states open up, and then suddenly they're hit with a full year of payments at $100,000 a year, or $100,000 a month, or $20,000 a month. Okay, is anybody going to have like $250,000 to plunk down in cash because none of the tenants had paid? I mean, at what point do you go, all right, tenant, you didn't pay for the last whole 1 year. You're out of here now. Okay, well, are they going to give them any money? So this is going to be wave one of the confiscation of land. Okay, so this whole great reset, when they say in 2030, that one video that said you will own nothing and you'll be happy. The beginning of the land confiscation begins now. Wave one are those landlords, tenants, people who can't afford, mainly it's going to be tenants and larger, apartment holders that are going to get wiped out of the game. Then all of a sudden government owns all these properties that have multiple units on them that then they can house people for free, hence universal basic income beginning. They're going to take over the property, and then suddenly there's an enormous amount of housing at a moment's notice for the government to give away or use. Now, secondly, with the power outages you talked about there, The water damage on the houses, you've seen those few articles too where they're saying, hey, please, any plumber in America, any plumber in Canada, if you're a plumber in the EU, we'll get you a visa to come over and work right now. They don't have enough plumbers across the entire planet to come in for the next year to even fix the damage from the water broken pipes. So think about a homeowner for a second. They're underwater. They haven't been working for 12 months. The bank froze the payments, so they couldn't get their house, repossessed, foreclosed on. Now you got about 50 grand worth of water damage in there, and suddenly they're going to let up on all the restrictions. Now, what's going to happen? In your right mind, would you continue? You were going to be foreclosed on anyway. So would you wait it out for the next 6 months to a year, living in a damp, moldy house to try to get it repaired maybe? No way. You're going to walk away from that. So then that's another way for the government to come in and confiscate personal property. I mean, you're talking about probably 100,000 houses at least at the bare minimum, and then not even to mention the residential or the commercial real estate that have been affected as well. So between that and the let off of all the freeze in evictions and all the apartment confiscation, which is going to probably be 500,000 different apartment units across the U.S. From small to large, the government's going to take all that over, and they're going to have multi-millions of units to house people in universal basic income to shift the communists around the country. But here's the third thing, and I'll go into this and maybe take a second here. In this $1.9 trillion inflation bill that's coming in, inside there's a rider under it, and they plugged this nefarious bill inside. It's 30 hyphen or /30, and I can't believe it's 3030 is the bill title that they're putting in there. It's so to slap you in the face with this 2030 garbage. But what they want to do is do an unrealized gain on your property from this year forward. Now, what they're trying to do is take the whole shebang and say, well, since it was purchased ever day one until now, the accrual gains, but I don't think they're going to go there. So let's say your grandfather bought some property for $20 an acre and now it's worth $20,000 an acre. The government wants you to pay capital gains on that, even though you're not going to sell it. So here's the thing. Let's just even start from this year, like from now, 2021. What the bill is trying to introduce is that from every year forward, you will need to pay capital gains on property, your house, assets, whatever you have, stocks, bonds, whatever, IRAs. Even though you don't sell it, you're still going to have to pay the capital gains on it every single year. And it's called an unrealized capital gains tax. Now, for your IRA or your stock portfolio, fine. If you get hit with like a $5,000 tax bill, you can sell some shares and you can just pay off your tax bill. But see, that's an extraction of wealth too. Like how many years in a row can you sell that to keep paying that? Because the government's going to keep printing money, and when they do, the inflation's going to take over. So you're always going to be behind the ball trying to pay off. But I want to get to the farmland here, and this is the scariest thing. And for those of out there that own family land, like 100 acres or down, 20 acres, 150 acres, 200, we're the kind of people they want to take out of the game. So here's how it's going to work. And it was explained to me. I had a really good phone call for like 3 hours and asked a billion questions. And the way it was explained to me was like that. I took incredible notes when I was talking. So from this year forward, if this bill passes, which it's going to get put in, it's going to pass, but it's still going to have to pass through the Congress and through the Senate. Now, hopefully it'll get stuck somewhere, because if it doesn't, it is the end of the United States, and it is the end of private property as you know it, period. It's going to be the largest wealth confiscation in global history if this thing passes through. So they want to take the capital gains. So let's say you bought land for $5,000 an acre, and now it's worth $10,000 an acre because everybody wants to run to the countryside. And see, this is it. They're targeting everybody in the countryside. They're not really targeting people in the suburbs or in the cities. They're going with the countryside land where everybody wants to move to. So if my gain is $5,000 an acre from last year because A, the hyperinflation, well, not hyperinflation, but massive inflation, the demand is absurd in the countryside, and this never-ending money printing is just driving fake prices everywhere up. So the government's going to want me to pay a capital gains of 30% on that $5,000 on 1 acre. So let's say my tax bill is $1,500. I have the 1 acre. It doubled in price. And now the government's going to say, well, you're not going to sell it, but you still have to pay capital gains on it because you made money on it. Okay, but I didn't sell it. But still, the government said you made money on it. You still have to pay the tax bill. Problem is, if it's financed, if I have a loan from the bank, I can't sell anything to pay the bank. The bank's going to take my money first. I should say the IRS. I can't sell any land to pay the IRS. So for 1 acre, you're going to be really stuck between a rock and a hard place. So your acre goes from $5,000 to $10,000 and you suddenly got a $1,500 tax bill. Well, a lot of people could cover that. But now let's bring it up. Somebody's got 10 acres and they get hit with a $15,000 tax bill. The problem is if it's financed, I cannot even sell 1 acre for $10,000 to then cover. I would sell 1.5 acres and then try to cover my IRS tax bill from that.
Wow.
The problem is the way it's set up. If you sell the land and if your land is financed, the amount you sell goes toward your note or toward your mortgage on your land. It doesn't go cash into your pocket so you can pay the IRS. And this is where they're going to catch everybody, and they are going to just bend you over a pole on this one. This is the direction it's going. Unless you have gold, silver, or some kind of cryptocurrency left over, they're going to take your land because nobody's going to be able to afford that. And 10 acres they're not really focused on trying to take 10-acre plots. What they're trying to do is take 50, 100, or 200 acre old family land. Because you got to think about the same thing. If you had 100 acres and that land went from $10,000 to say $15,000 an acre, and each acre had gained $5,000, you're looking at $500,000 of capital gains at 30% at $150,000 tax bill. And how much of your land are you going to have to sell off to pay off $150,000 owed to the IRS? Not one time, yearly. And see that the language in the bill is very opaque. Is it okay? Then it went up to 15,000, and then I paid off that. Okay, great. Now what happens if the price falls back down? See, they never talk about deductions for losses. They only continue to talk about the accrual and value moving forward. So then the next year, they're just going to print more money, so it's going to continue to hyperinflate away. So then, of course, wherever you look in history, when these hyperinflation or massive inflation events come, land could go up 14, 15 times in value in a single year. See, this is where we're going to get. So the Fed is working in conjunction with whoever, the World Economic Forum, working in conjunction with our own politicians who are communists trying to ruin our nation and bankrupt and take all land back under the control of corporation and government. All they have to do is print more money to drive the prices of land up into infinitum, and everybody's going to be playing catch up. So let's say it went up $5,000 per acre this year because, well, there's demand and there's some inflation. What happens next year when they print an extra 16, 20, 30 trillion dollars, and then that $5,000 gain turns out there's just so much extra money around that the gains in farm value went up $50,000 an acre. And that person who had 100 acres now has what, $5 million tax bill at 30%? Really? And this is the game they're going to play. They're going to hyperinflate you away where you can't pay your taxes, so you'll either have to sell off your land or you can't, because if it's owned by the bank and you're on a note, you're going to have to give up your land, pure and simple. And this is where we're going, Ransom. This is what really scares me. You either have gold, silver, or some kind of crypto, or you're going to lose your land. And that's the plan. They're going to take everybody's land by doing this garbage.
I'm going to take it to the next level. I was looking at this.
Take it.
Because
I
knew you were going to, for some reason, I knew you were going to talk about this, and it fits right into my theory about, really what's really going on. And it's exactly what you said. It's the most extreme case of transformation of wealth and transfer of wealth and fascism, the corporation, the merger of corporatocracy and government together as one entity. So I'm looking at the Zero Hedge article here. It's talking about 11 million at risk of losing their home once the COVID protections expire. But let's skip to something, with all of that stuff you were talking about, it's a lot to take in and it's kind of overwhelming. So let me tell you on a simple level how this is all going to fit in with everyone's day-to-day life. So we started talking earlier about, how the food kind of is at the end of its shelf life and the end of its supply chain when it reaches your dinner table, basically. So the answer to this, and I've been watching this and thinking about this, are hundreds and hundreds of these startup companies, and some that have been doing it for quite some time already, which are companies, corporations, that deliver the food directly to your house. So you no longer have to shop or cook or anything. You just, it's kind of like a TV dinner, except for they're claiming it's fresh, it's organic, maybe even from someplace. And there's multiples of these. There's just, tons of them. They're going to deliver the food right to your door, right? So this is another reason, not only for you not to ever go outside, it's another reason for you not to ever go to the corporation, where in all aspects of society right now, from local government to federal government, they are closing you off where you can't even get to them, talk to them, or give your grievances to them. So they're starting up all of these trends, companies that deliver everything to your home, so you'll no longer have to go out there. But on top of that, think about this. With the introduction of the idea of corporations having the ability to buy cities, incorporated cities, or just start one of their own, where at this corporation, they own everything. They own the diners. They own the apartments you live in. They own the transit, AI cars. Sony's talking about having a city, and Toyota is talking about building a smart city where, they own the AI cars that go everywhere. There's these little robots that deliver everything. It sounds great, but then you realize these corporations are also making it where your legislative, representatives are passing laws to make it where they can make their own laws. So now that they can make their own laws and incorporate their own cities, there's nothing to stop them from buying millions or billions of acres of farmland, all the houses, all the restaurants, all the grocery stores, into where you're just in a cell, basically, that you call your house. And you wait for everything. You wait for directions on when you can go outside and get fresh air. You wait for directions on what you're going to eat, when you're going to eat it, when it's going to be delivered. And, not only that, it takes away all your choices of food, like, do I want this or do I want that? I trust these people more than those. All of those, choices that people take for granted in their life, freedoms, you might say. I know that's a bad word nowadays, but freedoms are all going to be put in the hands of corporations. So just imagine this in the near future. The planet is changing. The weather's horrible. There's aliens outside. Whatever the case may be is the reason, or, the super virus. You can't go outside, but don't worry. We'll send you these delicious Soylent Green meals directly to your house. Now, how long do you think it's going to switch from these delicious steaks and asparagus meals that look just delicious right here on the picture over to maybe baby or grown in a lab meat, or synthetic meat, or meat made out of bugs? Because everywhere I look, they're telling you don't even eat the meat. Farming is bad. Cattle is bad. But you know what? We're going to replace all of that with, old extinct or removed species of bison and wildlife to claim and take back all of these eco zones and push the people into the inner city, so you can get your delicious Soylent Green delivered to you every Tuesday via the corporation that makes all the rules, that allows you to travel. And guess what? On top of it, they want to swab your butt. They want to swab your butt for you to be able to get this passport. So it's the ultimate version of submission into the corporatocracy of a complete AI takeover of every aspect of your life. Everything. Sorry.
But yeah, that is the ultimate submission, isn't it? Every time you want to go outside, you have to shove something up your rear end. That's like bizarre and demented. That's like a ritual type of thing right there. So you're going to have to grow your own food. And, the food, eventually what they're going to start delivering, like part of the going to the supermarket now is you can look at the tomato and say, nah, that one looks a little squishy. That one looks a little blemished. That one looks a little whatever. Everybody's got different tastes for what they like. You can choose your own food at that point, still to a point. You can walk into the supermarket and say, I don't want that one. I always like to reach the very, very back and get the one newest one because they put the oldest ones right at the front because most people just grab it and go. Where I'll take the time to actually look and find the thing that I want, the produce I want, the date I want on the thing. But when you get it delivered, you're going to have no choice. Just they're going to give you what they give you. And see, again, that puts you in another type of situation where if you have a bad credit score, are they going to give you the worst of the worst, like the one tomato that's almost half rotten that you got to eat within 6 minutes or else it's no longer good? Is that the kind of food you're going to get? Oh, there's a couple maggots running around it already. Well, good enough. That kind of corptocracy where we're moving into, and this whole thing, I was watching Corbett Wall. If anybody watches Feeder Flash out there, shout out. Corbett's a great guy to listen to. He is, in my opinion, the number one auction house and understanding of how auctions work for cattle and the cattle industry in general, the feed that goes into the cattle, and then the agriculture associated with the feed going in, empowering the entire cattle industry, and then on with the packers and that whole wholesale, movement from the feedlot over into the wholesale market and then on into the meat packing houses. Well, he was saying, the way things are going right now, there's a huge difference of the corporations are working together as a conglomerate. There's only 4. I didn't know this. He was saying apparently there's only 4 major buyers for packing houses, and they just kind of collude on prices and say, well, if you don't drop it to $117 or $114, then we're not going to take it at all. But their break-even costs were around $150. So, the farmers right now are real stuck in a hard place. They're losing $40 per head. Losing $40 per head. So, this is a collusion at all levels here. Until what point do you say, well, they're going to stop raising beef because they're losing money every head they get. Right now, there's subsidies from the U.S. government, USDA, to offset that. But what happens when they purposely stop the offset so every farmer loses money? Again, then they're going to come right back. You got the capital gain on your tax, on your land. You lost money on your cattle herd. It's just going to keep moving forward like this. It is a full-on assault against everything. So you're either going to have to grow your own food or you're going to have to just accept what comes at you. And, beyond that, instead of saying what's acceptable, we got to start solving this problem right now so we never get put in that situation. So, Ransom, what are some ideas of us before this, like miles before this ever evolves into what we're talking about tonight, like this whole system getting delivered to your house? We need to stop this, nip it in the bud right now. This should not even evolve from this point forward.
Yeah, but the crazy thing is that it is. Every time I, hear the dogs barking or whatever, I look outside, it's somebody getting some food delivered by one company or another company or a company that delivers their food. And then, like I said, all of these companies are popping up now that are trying to convince people that you don't even need to go to the grocery store now. It's going to be delivered right to you, and it's better. You can't even come up with these meals yourself. No one knows how to cook or anything like that. I think that literally, and I've been saying this kind of on my channel, that we have to change over like right now into a new mindset of the time that you're going to live in. We always talk about prepping food, prepping tools, prepping whatever, for protection. But think about prepping your skills, your actual real world skills. Do like I keep going back to this preservation of food. You were talking about a cool thing with berries and stuff. And I know people used to salt their meats. There's probably 1,001 ways to do this. But the fact is 99.9% of the population doesn't know how to do that. They burn their peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, for Christ's sake, So they're not really sure how to cook. They're not sure how to farm. They're not sure how to fix things. And there's a whole generation of of these kind of people that, they're not dumb. They're just ignorant to the ways of the entire world for millions of years up to this point. And so the only real tool I think you can have is start thinking like you're a Paleolithic human being on this planet and start realizing the resources that are around you, the inventive resources that you can use when there are no longer box stores that you want to depend on, and no longer billionaire corporations choosing what options you have in life. And I'm sure you remember when you were a kid that when you went to Radio Shack or something like that, there were thousands and thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of parts, accessories to things that you could make things, fix things. You go to Radio Shack now, what do you see? You see billion-dollar corporations selling their tablets and phones and maybe a radio-controlled car, something like that. Things for people that are easily amused. But what they don't sell are things you can build and invent things with anymore. We're limited to only Amazon or things like that deliver it, just like the food, right to your door. The whole concept is that people are going to have to start learning how to make things again, make tools, make machines of their own. And then you get into this problem where we've allowed our society to grow out of control, where our government tells us what we can and can't invent. I was watching one of your programs the other day about a magnetic motor, something I've pictured in my head many times. And what's funny is I had never seen that design, but that's exactly what I pictured it would be like in my mind, is that exact setup to push things around. And you imagine if you had one of those, and every little chicken house, outhouse, and garage or storage shed. Imagine if you went, instead of wasting your money on a new plasma TV, you went to somewhere and you bought a bunch of solar lights, you bought some extra wire, you extend the light bulb portion and the battery into your home and put them in the house with the switch, and then it's always being charged. And if we start coming into a time where there's no sun to rely on, which is a very good possibility, especially with all the volcanic activity around the world, probably going to increase, ejecting lots of particles into the atmosphere. And what's weird is you hear these people like Bill Gates and other people talking about trying to deflect the sun, when obviously that's probably not going to be a problem in the near future. We'll probably already have billions of particulates up in the sky from volcanic activity. So what are you going to do at that point when you don't have a grid? You're going to have to do something.
And thanks for joining us for the first hour. We're going to talk about magnetic motors and using Parendev Earth's magnetic field to power a drive system to create electricity. When we come back to second hour here on Revolution Radio Studio A, I'm your host, David Klein, along with Ransom Godwin. We'll be right back. 2 minutes drive seconds.
catch it. And if we burn, you burn with us.
Are you awake yet? I hope. We've tried and we've tried for years and years to use passive resistance and loud voices to make a change. The time is over. Your governments around the world have no other goal than to decimate your entire existence at the hands of the bankers and the elites. The war is coming, and it's your choice to decide if you want to be a warrior or a victim. Denial is not a choice anymore. Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported radio station on the planet. Not giving up. Revolution Radio. All right, thanks for listening while we took that short break here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. And now we're going to get back to your host.
And welcome back for the second hour of mini Ice Age conversations. David Dubine here, along with Ransom Godwin, 420 TV Freedomist Films. Please remember, right here on Revolution Radio is listener supported. So if you like this type of information flow, something you can't really find across the commercial channels, if you will, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, all this conversation's banned. Are you kidding me? The conversation Ransom and I had last hour would be demonetized and taken off and shadow banned, if not even allowed to share the links in most every single venue that is considered commercial. So please consider a donation to keep this venue on air. This will be one of the last ones that withstands the censorship. I mean, if we're going down into the point where they're censoring now Dr. Seuss books, I mean, really, you can go find Mein Kampf on eBay, but you cannot buy Dr. Seuss books. I mean, there's something dementedly twisted where Mein Kampf is still available for sale and Dr. Seuss isn't. Like, this is an inversion of a world we really don't want to be living in. So it's going to take us comparing information to find solutions to these, twists in society. So again, Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. Take a look at what they have for options, from merch all the way to direct donations or joining as a patron over there on Patreon. Now, as we were talking about before the break, Ransom, you'd mentioned Parandev magnetic motors and being able to also use solar panels, just add some extra wire and then bring the lights into your house. Now, my brother-in-law were thinking about doing something like this with marine batteries and having a bank of marine batteries. Because where we are, we're kind of around, there's a couple rivers close to here, and there's a lot of fishermen, a lot of boats, and, marine batteries are very common around here. But you know what? There's a shortage of them right now. You're limited to 2 per person going into the store to buy marine batteries. Can you imagine such a thing? Like 2 years ago, if I would have told you there'd be a limit on marine batteries, you'd laugh. Now, marine batteries aren't the most efficient, I understand, but something better than nothing. And if you're going to try to stabilize a charge after you power up something in charge of, a full marine battery, geez, I mean, how many lights could you run for so many multiple hours on that? So the solutions are out there. A lot of people are trying to use these old batteries from the Tesla or electric vehicles. Doesn't have to be a Tesla. But there's only so much of that for storage that you can get your hands on now, and that's going to continue to diminish. So, Ransom, please continue with your thoughts and ideas on the magnetic motors and what you were looking at for ways for us to be more self-sufficient, because I like the idea of solar-powered something to be used in a home. All we have to do is extend the range, extend the wire, extend the cable, which is not the manufacturer's spec. But, if you, like we learned, Radio Shack when we were kids, how many times did you shock yourself putting stuff together, realizing that hey, if I'm going to put the solder on that circuit, you learn by getting shocked, right? Or something doesn't work.
Yeah.
The negative, oh, we forgot to even put the ground wire in. Damn, it's not going to turn on. We forgot the ground wire. Just the simplest of things. We all used to know that as kids, and now, it's very limited on that. So
yeah, it is weird.
Back to the experimentation phase again, but continue on your thought there of experimenting what we're limited on, even what we can create in today's world.
Well, with the solar lights thing, it's just kind of straightforward. They sell a lot of really good outside solar security lights that have the little, the motion sensor on them. Those things break down over time, but they do last quite a while. But think about how long they'll last when they're outside of the elements and inside of your house, the actual lighting unit. And then all you have to do is keep your solar panels clean and the connection's good. And you always have a little switch there that you can turn on when the grid goes off that will have a fully charged battery. And not only that, it'll turn itself off when you leave the room, or you could put a setting on it where, like you said, you had stored batteries that were being charged and just drain them. But the real weird concept is so right here in my hands, I have this big ball of these little lesser magnets, and they're stuck to the super magnet, and they're really hard to get off. I got one of these, hardcore magnets. But the whole idea that this little bit of mass of stuff here goes back to when we were talking about stored energy, from seeds to you to ideas. Magnets are the ultimate idea of this, concept, because this is a bunch of stored energy in here, and it's not hard to arrange these. It's kind of weird. It's like DNA. You can just have this ball of magnets that doesn't do anything sitting in the corner, being dangerous, attracting any metal thing, or you could set it up in a specific arrangement. They all come off, and you can set them up in a certain arrangement and allow the earth to move things around. And when things move around, they generate energy. So how about that? Oh God, I'm sticking everything on my table to that thing. But yeah, just the whole idea. I was looking at the design on there of one you were showing on one of your shows, and just, you imagine having maybe one or two of those, or even a smaller version or a larger version all over your farm and house, where you could just literally go out and pull a lever to unlock the magnetism and allow things to start moving. And it's nothing even that complicated. It's something along the same lines as those old little windmills that used to pump the water on your ranch. It's just a little bit of generation to turn something to get something accomplished. And we have so much technology right now. If people would get a little creative, you can use things that are not meant for things for other things. Like, for example, a couple years back, I installed a window unit air conditioner in my son's room, and I got the tilt of it wrong, which made it start collecting a bunch of water. And I live in a very arid environment that's in the desert, and this thing was collecting 4 or 5 or 6 gallons of water all day long from the condensation coming off of the Freon coil. So obviously, if that happens on accident, you can tweak it and fine tune it to the ultimate production of water. And if you remember, Luke Skywalker was a moisture farmer. They weren't farming food out there. They were farming water. So if you live, I've even thought about other things, like maybe something, if you live in the desert, that if you've ever seen those pull down screens, you could set up a thing like that you expand when the wind is low, and collect a bunch of free water from dew in the morning that will pour right into your gardens. I mean, there's just on and on things like this. I'm sure your house, not your house specifically, but some of you have a leaky toilet or a leaky thing. Some of these things, you wouldn't imagine how much water you're wasting. And if you took that water and repurposed it, you could have so much extra stuff. We live in a land of abundance, and people just don't understand how the Legos go together. But once you did, like you said, you could just imagine that if I had a small motor over here running my computer. When we reach the point of human beings where we don't need to give in order to use energy, in other words, we don't need other people to produce energy of any kind, whether it's energy for our bodies through food, spiritual energy from studying and meditating, or even actual energy out of the technology we have. We can store the energy. Storing energy and deciding when to release it. It's like a universal law. And if we could incorporate that into our lives, the governments and the controlling elite will have a real problem if everyone just starts doing regular things. They'll have to pass so many laws that it'll be unrealistic for them to accomplish this. In the world of tech, viruses and softwares come out so fast that laws and regulations can't keep track with them. And I think that every human being should be on the same ideal, but in your real life, storing energy of all kinds.
Yeah, you mentioned the water motors there. Something called gravitational vortex power, GVP. Now, this is an idea for a neighborhood or a few homes together that have a stream near you, or you have an aquifer that's pouring out of a mountain that can be redirected into a tub or a channel that can then hold the water and release it at a certain rate. So, for example, let's say you have a aquifer on your property that's coming out at 20 gallons a minute. But you would build your holding tank so it would release at, say, 15 gallons a minute or 17 gallons a minute. So it would always remain full and you'd have an overflow on that. But then that 15 gallons per minute rate would be the thing that you would tune your generator to. So the flow rate going through your generator would be tuned for a little bit less than your outflow is, but you'd have holding tanks so it's continuously full, continuously running, continuously pumping that and pushing that water downhill. So one of the main things that I'm also so surprised with governments around the world not utilizing magnets in the Earth's magnetic field for free, because you got to think it's just a one-time installation cost. There's no utility bills after you install it. See, then they lose power because there's no tax base and there's no more government control and your life costs drastically reduce. But it's really shocking for me in all these areas across the planet. Now, GVP and gravitational vortex power will not work in an enormous amount of places on the planet, but at the same time, it will work in an enormous amount of places on the planet that have continuous water flow from a stream. Now, generally, you're going to need like 1 cubic meter per second flowing through, but if you get the calculations right, you can just scale that down to fit your water output needs. And I was looking at this stuff over in Germany, and there's this company called Zoltlotterer. It's Z-O-T-L-O-T-R-E-R. And he was working on Schauberger's vortex power principles. And this company, Zoltlotterer, out of the patents from the 1930s, created something in our modern day. It's basically using a piece of concrete piping that you would see that, the utilities on the side of the road. Sometimes you see that when they're installing bigger sewer pipes. And they cut an inlet into it, and they just let the water spin in a circle like you would when your bathtub at the very, when you pull the plug out and the water gets kind of low and then it starts making that vortex in there. Well, you can replicate that same vortex, but you can scale it up bigger. And then all you do is put a rotor in the center there, and then that spins. And that's what then you can attach to an alternator. I've seen some real simple stuff. I saw some things in Nepal where they had used just a bicycle wheel, and they created their own curved blades on that, and then they actually put an automobile alternator on that, so that continually charged the battery, which would get back to that. Again, the marine batteries, car batteries, some kind of battery to charge. And they were finding that since it was continuously flowing, they were able to overflow the charge into several batteries. And then people would come down from the hills and recharge their rechargeable lights, and then they would get batteries and take it back higher in the Himalayas. So it was like a recharge spot. But it only worked part of the year because they were only going on natural flow off the melt. So they got about 4 months of electricity off that. But anyway, it's so surprising that all these inventions and ideas are out here to give us free power. And when I say that, I literally mean free. After the installation costs, you don't have to burn anything. So everybody's yapping about CO2 and yipping on about, pollution. I'm not a fan of the particulates. I'm really not. I mean, there's so much pollution around. I'm really just so disgruntled and just disillusioned with how much pollution's in the atmosphere and plastics in the oceans. And okay, I get it. I understand that. But a natural gas burning power plant should not be demonized. Yeah, it puts out CO2, but who cares? CO2 is plant food. So all these purists out there saying, oh, CO2 is bad. Okay, well, you want to limit the CO2? Great, I'll agree with you for this time. Why are we not using magnetic motors, and why are we not using gravitational vortex power? If you all are on your bandwagon the whole time about reducing CO2, we've got two perfect options here that provide free power for everybody and reduce CO2 to zero. But nobody wants to talk about that. I just don't get it, Ransom. I just don't get it. I really don't. The solutions are there, but nobody wants to do it.
I think they'll let us use it in like 2060 or something like that. You know, like when they really need more workers all of a sudden, because there's not very many people and all their AI and are breaking down and their servants are tired. When they crawl back out of their holes. No, I'm just kidding about that, but it might be that way. I think the reason that they're doing that is because they just haven't figured out how to control it and manipulate it into a way that we would have to buy it and depend on it. Because like you said, it's a completely, it doesn't produce harmful chemicals. It doesn't produce radiation. It doesn't mess with the environment. The only thing that it could possibly do is, create electromagnetic fields, possibly. But even anybody knows that around magnets, it's not really dangerous, but it's almost like the force, kind of, it's energy that we don't even have to do. And magnets are so fascinating because we know that the entire universe is an electromagnetic universe, and everything runs off that. That should have been common sense to start there. You would think that that's where our technology should have started in the first place once we discovered magnetite. But for some reason, they don't do that. And I was showing everybody these articles about, it's from one end to the other. The question is not whether or not things are going to shut down and reset. It's how are you going to be able to flourish in the new world? Are your kids going to have the skills that they need to navigate this new world? Are you going to, also have those skills enough to survive and come out the other end? A lot of people are prepping and stuff, but I think they're missing out on some of the smaller ideas. And I'm working on this idea, and I'm going to share it with you behind the scenes. But I have a theory that I may have discovered not only the oldest, probably conceptual symbol in human history, but it's a symbol that all math comes from. So in a way, I can prove that human beings, at least Cro-Magnon man, has been worshiping math for, I'm going to say, 1 million years. If you add in the way that the modern human's bones are shaped, that seem to have come directly from farming. I'm going to say millions of years of human history. Now, we know it keeps getting reset, and we know we're in that point right now, but there's a symbol that could be put on rocks and all kinds of things all over the world where cavemen could just come out, and I'm calling them cavemen because we're all going to be hiding underground or, in these stone buildings or something like that, or something we've made if we're going to come out of that kind of event on the other side. So I'm going to call them cavemen in whatever epic we're calling the one after the Holocene here. And they're going to come out and they can look at one symbol that would allow them to expand their mind into all sacred geometry, all universal constants in mathematics. And I figured this out with a very simple symbol. And it's kind of a trip. And I think the reason I'm bringing up the symbol is because that's what we as a society need to concentrate on, is a way to pass down knowledge that doesn't involve governmental or authoritative powers trying to, limit or critique or funnel the way you absorb information and learn things. Because we all know that the public school system should have probably been teaching us how to grow food and purchase land and maintain land at the kindergarten level. So yeah, I think that's where it's at, is accumulation of knowledge, going through not just prepping in the physical sense, but prepping for the future of mankind in the mental sense.
Yeah, I would agree with you. And, a lot of the sacred symbols, too, like Meteoron's cube or the flower of life, these things are across every single time era of our existence here. But you're also right about that. Moving forward, a lot of people think the prepping thing is about getting this amount of stored food. Well, that's great for the interim, but what happens when your stored food runs out? So you got to think about the next generation of it, if you will, not in terms of a human being born for the next generation, but if you're going to grow food this summer, how much of that seed will you save to be able to bring your next crop up? And then who else around you? I was contacted by somebody in Arkansas who wants to do a seed share. So they're like, yeah, you're up in Tennessee. You might have slightly different seeds. So why don't I send you a bunch from my area? And then you reciprocate in whatever you have, because I know you have a lot of seed. And they were telling me, I see your videos. I know you got a lot of seed, dude. You got a tons. And I really do have tons, like multiple tons, literally thousands and thousands of pounds. But I have a farm, so I'm able to get, those 50-pound bags, and I'll go and I'll buy 1,000 pounds of seed at a time. So to reciprocate the seed, to think about bringing it to full fruit and full head, or whatever you're going to bring it to, full grain head. Like for me, for the sorghum this year, my whole thing is not about for silage or for cattle feed, because you can get that type of sorghum that grows 3 feet tall and it's just green plant, and cows love it, pigs love it, chickens love it. But I want to bring it to full seed. Same with the buckwheat. But then how much would I save to replant an entire field for next year? So am I going to need to save, 800 to 1,000 pounds of my full yield to just plant for next year? But then I need to store it, but then I need to keep it free from pests, because there's things called mice and boll weevils and aphids and all kind of stuff that's going to get in there and nibble your thing. How many beetles want to get in there and eat all your staff too? So it's all about bringing that to the next generation. Prepping is great, and please do get as much as you can together: food, water, metals, precious metals, etc., ammo if you can get it. But eventually, if you shoot your last cartridge out, your last shell is spent, and then what? I mean, how many people know how to reload their own ammo? How many people save the shells and then reload that? I mean, who even has the basic rudimentary skills to create gunpowder again, to be able to reload your ammo? Not many. Does anybody have their own pour where they can melt the metal down and then pour your own slugs again? I'm talking about hunting, say something out of a shotgun. Go use slugs out of a shotgun, 20 gauge or something. A lot of these skills are lost, like blacksmithing skills. How many people know how to do that at the very basic rudimentary level of even repairing something? I was talking about soldering, even, something from Radio Shack that Ransom and I, just reminiscing about here. I mean, how many people know how to get a soldering iron and a soldering wire and put two things back together electronically so the charge will go and then make your device work again?
I do.
Not many in this day and age, not many. The deductive skills of what's wrong with the thing that broke to try to get to repair it again. Because I tell you, I have this catalog here. I bought this catalog. I was at a estate sale the other day, and I found this catalog from 1947 for farm implements, fencing, stoves, tools, and roofing from 1947. So and it's crazy, because at the same estate sale, I found this hand-powered tool sharpener. But it's a little sticky. All the gears work, everything works, it's just a little sticky one. So I'm using this catalog to see what it originally looked like, to bring it back to its former glory. But the only thing I'm stuck at now is trying how to clean the sharpening stone itself. So, these are kind of deductive things that if I would drop that device in front of somebody, they probably wouldn't even know what it was. And then you got to sharpen it by hand? What do you mean? You got to twist this thing by hand and sharpen it? Well, what? It's so far out of the realm for a lot of people. So how many hand-powered tools do you have? Because if there's no electricity, you're going to have to do things without electricity. So for me, my whole goal now is to buy as many non-electric powered hand tools as I can. And and I went to another estate sale where I found hand-cranked wood drills from different varying diameters. And you literally put it in and you twist the handle by hand to drill by hand. So I'm starting to accrue a little collection. I bought one of those Grim Reaper scythes as well. Because if you're going to do your own grain and you got no electricity and there's no motor fuels, you're going to have to harvest it somehow. And I got a hand-cranked corn grinder as well. It's actually a corn shearer. You put the whole ear in, and then it rips all the kernels off the ear. It's more for food for like pigs and whatnot, but the box was already built with it. You just insert the ear of corn and you crank, and it rips all the kernels off it. How are you going to harvest your food? How are you going to store your food? How are you going to keep everything for the next generation of food? I mean, this is where my mind is already, like stepping back into the 1940s or the 1880s, because that's where we're going. If we lose electricity, man, we're going to lose 90% of the population within the first 6 months, probably quicker. I don't know, Ransom, what do you think? Like, if we lose electricity, how fast would the population decline, and by what percentage do you think?
I think it would take about 2 years, probably 2 years for all of the people that rely on electricity to disappear. There will be people that adjust, obviously, so not everybody's going to disappear. I was just thinking about that. When you were talking about these little hand drills and stuff, you made a really good point about another thing that people don't think of. They're storing bullets and they're storing this and they're storing that. But are you storing crates and crates of nails and screws? You know what I mean? In other words, if you don't, Home Depot's not going to be open. How about that? So you're going to have to use these old hand cranking tools and make holes and learn how to make dowels and build buildings without screws. And there's more and more of that ancient knowledge that most people don't even have access to, didn't think about. And then, I was picturing the futuristic version of those same things, without electricity. A hand tool that has like, a bunch of magnets in it that are spinning while you put it in the tool shed. And then there's little transistors on it storing the energy. So you just go out and, click the button and release the energy there. I could see a whole world of micro, super magnets running little hand tools and all kinds of stuff. And it's amazing we never went down that, that path. But as far as with no electricity, you got to think realistically. There are so many people that rely on air conditioning, heaters, things like that, and they've lived their whole life becoming accustomed to things like running water in the kitchen, a toilet that works, all of these things. I mean, that will completely devastate civilization without power because they're not flushing toilets, they're getting dysentery. People that are diabetic can't keep their insulin at the right temperature. And then on top of everything, you got to think about the entire supply chain shutting down once there's no electricity. So all of the people out there that have become dependent on pharmaceuticals, I hate to say it, you're also kind of going to go by the wayside when there's no electricity, unless you've been planning for this and you have stockpiles of what you need and you have ways to generate electricity, or maybe, like we were talking about before, caveman styles of preserving food, keeping things cool. If you live in the right part of the country, true, it does get hot in the summer, but if you dig down in the earth, that ground is going to keep the cool for the majority of the spring, where you still have refrigeration. You can put your food there, you can put your medicines there. True, it won't last all year, but you can come up with other methods like I was talking about before. You can get small solar panels and batteries and attach them. And like you were talking about in the idea of a marine battery style hookup, you could have a bunch of batteries being charged by these little tiny solar powered things that could run a refrigerator for quite some time when the power goes out. There's a lot of ways. The problem is how do we, accumulate these ideas and put them into real practice in the world? Like you're talking about, you're always thinking ahead about next year. We got to be thinking ahead of the next decade, the next 2 decades. What are you going to do if is the main question. And most people never have an answer for that. And if they do, it's not a realistic answer. Have you ever watched that show where they kind of go out there and they grade these preppers on, their bunker and their supplies, and then you got this guy judging them or whatever? You got to be doing that to yourself. And I wouldn't rely on television shows to ever get any super amount of real, actual, useful information. Most of that stuff's hidden away in books at this point.
Yeah, I'll agree with you. And also, with these estate sales that I'm hitting, looking for the hand-powered tools and looking for glass cookware and, just things that, because these estate sales are such a vision into the past on how people in the 1940s and 50s lived, because generally the family or the oldest of the generation, the grandparents that have died, that they're now selling their items, were still alive in the 1940s and 50s. And that's mostly where these households are coming from. Sometimes it's a little older in the 1930s, but it gives you a real good glimpse into. So these, like hand trusted items that were in the house. And the reason they were in the house is because they were the best of the time for that family to keep them in the house, to use those in the house. So for me, I'm thinking, all right, they've already pre-proved everything. And that's why it was in their house, because it was the best. Yeah. So an enormous amount of glass cookware that I'm looking for, with the books. And I scored some really good books at this estate sale. Was the Encyclopedia of Gardening from 1952. The thing was like 1,000 pages, and it was $10. And it went through everything. And then I found another one from the Tennessee Bureau of Land Management and Forestry from the 1960s on teaching you how to build like 15 types of greenhouses using wood and plastic, with all the designs there, all the measurements, excuse me, all the specs right there, everything in paper. So if your electricity goes down, you don't have to rely on the internet. Because, one thing is, I talk to people also who are prepping a lot, and they're like, well, we got like 16,000 gigabytes of stuff, and, we can have anything about anything. And well, what happens if your power goes down and you can't recharge your computers? What about in the evening? If you don't have electricity and you have lanterns and everybody can read, I want everybody at my place reading a different book in the evenings, talking, discussing about it, making a plan for the next day on how to move forward together as a group of people. And that whole 1840s thing, when you're talking about building without nails, personal story, before I bought the land I looked at, 30 some plots of land that we went to, my sister, my friends, and we would kept going plot of land. We found this 140-acre piece of land. It was along the river, but it was really too expensive. It was way outside the price range. But went to take a look at it anyway. It had 2 barns on it. One of the barns was what exactly you described. It was built in the 1840s, not a single nail on it. The thing was like 30 feet tall and had these tobacco drying rafters in it, and everything had those like fitting dowels together. Not a single nail in the entire barn, using cedar posts. And you got to realize, how big were those cedar trees they used? I think those things were 30 feet tall on the just perfectly round 30-foot posts inside there from cedar, tarred on the bottoms. You could still see where the tar was. That's 150 years ago. And those things, I know it had been, and it was kind of a little bit off center because the earth had sagged a bit, but still, how many people can build something without a nail? And what's the precision going to be on using a saw blade to do that? And can you resharpen your saw? So how many people are getting files to be able to resharpen things? Sharpening stones, just the whole loop of things going back to the beginning of being able to even give you the tools ability to create the thing you want. So to even create dowels, you're going to have very sharp tools, but to have the sharp tools, you're going to need something that never ever breaks, like a sharpening stone or a file. Shit, those things last for 100 years.
Yeah.
And then how do you use it? You got to practice on it too. I mean, here's my whole thing. I am trying to sharpen chainsaw blades, but I still have to use the guide because I can't get the angle right just freehanding it. So for me, I'm back to the thing of, putting the guide on top of the chain so then I can file it down and get it to the correct thing. Until I learn that and I can do it freehand, just sitting out in the field. But still, I'm miles ahead of people because I know how to sharpen a chainsaw blade. Like how many of us is it going to take into a community so everybody can survive? I mean, I can't do everything on my own. I probably need 50 other people that know skills to keep a community going where we could survive. Nobody's going to go through this alone. We're going to need double multiples of everybody who has specialized skill sets. And this is where we see it, like how everybody's so divided now. And this whole world we're moving into keeps dividing people again and again and again. So nobody wants to talk to each other. And I think possibly it is a reason to do exactly what I'm talking about. Divide you so you never create the communities to get those skill sets together. So even your chances for survival are lessened, which takes us back to the Georgia Guidestones. I think they're really planning to bring the population down to incredible minimal. I mean, is that a phrase even? I don't know.
Yeah, we didn't know the grand solar minimum actually meant people minimum. I was listening to you talk about those estate sales because, not exactly on the estate sale end, but from people's estates did I acquire quite a bit of stuff working cleaning out houses and stuff. And I feel you remember that guy from the 80s and early 90s that would wear that suit with the question marks all over it, and he would get on and be real annoying. I got grants from the government. There's grants to make a swimming pool, grants to fix your bathroom. You know, I feel like that guy sometimes because I got books for radio. How do you do ham radio? I got books for that. How do you make it? How do you use it? Books on electricity. How do you wire things? How do you fix things? Right there, we got books on religion and books on history, books on welding, books on the botany, not lobotomy, the body. But you know, it's just funny because I feel like that guy because I'm starting to accumulate little books on certain topics. Like, what do you want to know about? You want to know about electricity? You want to know about welding? You want to know about radio? How about medicine? Do you want to know about herbs and what can heal you up in the wild? These are all the kind of things that seem like specific fields of, educating. But you got to remember all the people around the time of the founding of our country were jacks of all trades. And not just, I wouldn't say jacks of all trades, but damn near genius of all trades. So they knew about writing. They knew about literature. They knew how to chop a tree down, how to weld it. And, they knew how to weld. They knew how to do everything it took to be self-sufficient because they had no other choice. They were on the dawn of invention, and you got to think about how far have we come from then, where there was no electricity and people were carving out a life for themselves, to now where everything that you can think of is somehow dependent on a major corporation or government, and we're at that point. You're right about the community, and you got to realize whenever you scan through the news and you see all these articles directed at morphing the minds of a child, that you know that they go for the child because they know if they get the child, they have control of the mother. And if they have control of the mother, they have control of the men. And if you can stop at the basic unit, a family unit, you don't get a tribe, you don't get a community, you don't get a culture, you don't get a country, you don't have nothing. And it's exactly what you said. If you could break the bonds of society at the family level, you'll never have communities that can come together and exchange ideas, talents, and expertise in order to restart a society in a different way that's not under the control of the controllers, which I think they're going to leave us hanging is what's going to happen. In my opinion, here in the not too distant future, all of the powers that be are going to recede back into their little dark crevices and holes and let human beings completely unprepared and uneducated on the cycle that they're going to just deal with it, which is going to lead to a massive population reduction. All is planned, and they're getting the leftover remnants of people used to the system that they want to implement when that's over. It's more than a sci-fi world. I mean, I keep joking around showing this article from China where they're talking about no single foreigner can come into their country without getting the swab where the sun don't shine. But then on top of that, you got people over here in the United States already trying to set up states for COVID passports. So, all of those things we've been saying for over a year are all coming true. The COVID passport is true. They are going to micromanage everything about your life, from your choices of food, the way you run and maintain your property, to when you can go outside, when you can grocery shop, or when you can get your food delivered is what I think it's all going to come to that. Walmart and the other chains, you mark my words, within the next year will say that they're moving their internet ordering system and they're going to expand that into delivery to your home. So think about the private property aspects of always having people trying to have access to your private property. It's already bad enough whenever your property mingles with municipalities and utility companies. Now imagine everybody, every company and their brother all laying claim to right of way to get on your property to do this, that, or the other thing. It's a crazy, brave new world. So brave.
Well, I think the people that would be left over, coming in 2035, 2040, I mean, they would be masters of everything to be able to get through this. And, perhaps, and I was reading a documentary and they were talking about, in a bizarre, demented way, that society needs to have a reset sometimes because there's too much dead weight. And the way to do it is to create the ultimate trauma to wipe out part of the people, and the strongest will survive and bring their race through. Because, and I'm not talking about race of people like, Asian, black, white, not that. The human race itself, like all people as a race of humans, not apes or not, insects, but us, to bring it through, because we're coming through this cosmic ray density. And apparently this is not the only rodeo that this has ever been done before. Apparently it's like the 34th or 35th time that we're going through this cycle. And the whole thing goes through that it's a managed planet. We're on a farmed planet. And sometimes for the next generation after the cosmic ray bombardment to adjust to the new world, the new Earth, if you will, that's being structured electrically, vibrationally, electromagnetically for what we have been stable at for, let's say, the last 500 years, 1,000 years, even since the last ice age, the exit out of the Younger Dryas. Okay, the vibrational frequency, the entire frequency field changed at that point. We were in an ice age. The frequency field changed when we exited the ice age. Because I'll come back to it again. You got to think about 90,000 years of stable climate on the planet. Now, everybody, they try to distract you with the Ice Age lexicon. It's not like that. That climate was stable for 90,000 years. Do you think humans would have found the sweet spot to grow food and set up cities and find the area that wasn't too cold, that still didn't get too cold in the winter? Of course they did, around the planet. After the ice sheets had grown to their maximum, the weather apparently was stable for 30,000 plus years after the full maximum glaciation. The only problem that started to set humans back was around 27 to 25,000 years ago, when it started to get a little bit warmer. So they were experiencing the same thing on the opposite end. And this is why we got a lot of those cave paintings and whatnot around that time, around 23 to 20,000, 17,000 years ago. They were going through a tumultuous change in climate as well. They were coming out of an ice age. So the climate started to destabilize then too. Because you imagine 30,000 years of stable climate, like what kind of societies had evolved at that point? Right. You got to think, some of these legends and myths that people talk about, I hate to be so cliche about, like Atlantis and Lemuria and stuff, but, it has some real basis in fact that if you had a stable climate for that such a long period of time, you would have made vast, gigantic, unbelievable societies, way more than us. You got to think about it. Like our history starts, 5,000 years ago?
They say. Because
our climate's been sort of stable since then, more stable. After the 4.2K event, it was stabilized since then. So let's say we had 4,000 years of stable climate now, where we evolved to where we are now, 4,000 years. Well, that's a C-130 flying over the house. Damn, I thought they were coming at 8:30, and I was trying to catch that. Man, they go right over the house at about 1,000 feet. They're doing some high-speed maneuvers through the valleys now.
Wow.
But I digress. Sorry, I got distracted by the plane.
Same thing's happening here.
Yeah, it's strange. Like, it's just started in the last 2 months. They'll come over the mountains and they'll do these high-speed banking maneuvers through the valleys and come screaming over right through the middle of the valley here, and like 1,000 feet or maybe 1,500. They're not. So the one mountain I know behind us over here is 1,400 feet in elevation, and they're under that. Their wingtips are below the mountaintop. So they're in at 15, or they're in at like 1,200 feet or under 1,000 feet. But they're doing a lot of maneuvers right now, and I've noticed more air traffic. True, recently too. There's been more helicopters, and I've heard a lot more helicopters, and fighter jets have been going, but they always protect in NREL and the nuclear thing. They're always doing their patrols around. There's been a lot more strange, weird, lower air traffic here in the last 2 months, and I've noticed it, and that's why I kind of went off there. The thing about that, our climate's been stable. We're going to go into an unstable climate, but if you had a society that was inner Earth, now it's conspiracy theory. It's an inner Earth, inner Earth, but in realistic terms, almost every society on the planet talks about something from the inner Earth coming out to guide them. Either it's Quetzalcoatl or the ant people or whatever it is. And then once humanity reestablishes itself, after agriculture is given back, mathematics is understood again, they just disappear until the next cycle. So if you were to leave us like we are now on the surface of the planet, who would survive after 15 or 20 more years as we go into this cosmic ray bombardment, the shift into, I really think we're going to once in a 2,000-year event, the cracks in the earth, the mud flood, and all this stuff. Who's going to survive after that and still be able to produce food, store food, create their own medicine, have their communities sussed out? At the end of that 15, 20-year period, I mean, we're going to be down to, 500 to 700 million people only on the planet. That'll be it. But those are the people, and that whole nefariousness is this, philosophy book I was reading about brings us right back into, you need to reset to bring up and strengthen the humanity. It's like the genes coming through, the strongest of the strong get through these cycles. And it's not like, they're going to coddle everybody and bring you down and keep you in a base somewhere and keep you in a camp somewhere and coddle you and keep you because you're good, just because you're a person. They're like, they want everybody dead who can't survive because it requires this, only the strongest move through the next phase of, and I mean, like I say, they were talking about the 35th, 37th iteration of this, like the next rodeo. It's not the first one. So these controllers, off Earth, inner Earth, whatever, the controllers of farm planet Earth, this is what happens every so often. So that's kind of the way I'm looking at it too. So I will be one of those coming through the backside.
I think you're right, and this is weird. On this subject of inner Earth, I actually have some firsthand knowledge about this. When I lived on Andrews Air Force Base, when I first moved there, they started a construction project. I believe it's on the southeast end of the base, but anyway, it's outside of where anybody or dependents or the public or anybody could get to. But I lived there for 4 years in a row, and during that time, they built a dirt mound the size of the Great Pyramids out there, which is only one conclusion that you can draw from that, is that they hollowed out a massive underground area that obviously they were building more or adding to or building a new subterranean bunker and system there. And this is in the already, heavily catacombed area of the DC area. You got Annapolis, the head of the Naval Intelligence. You got Bowling Air Force Base. You got the Andrews Air Force Base, which is the presidential base, and also it's a joint base, so it has Marines and Navy and Air Force there too. And then nearby you have all of the political things, like Washington D.C., the CIA, et cetera, et cetera. I routinely drove by the NSA building, which a lot of people don't know is surrounded by penitentiaries that are not used by the public. So the whole concept of our government, which is funny because I've been studying these catacomb maps now, and all of the places that ancient man wrote on the rocks about Squatter Man, about, showing different slices of the Taurus field at different times, things like that, the centipedes, the ladders, the Pratt instabilities, all of these are painted in areas that have a history of newspapers that say they found giants there, and B, are also places of military digging underground. So it's almost like just a theory, but different forms of man have been traveling the same paths over and over again, every cycle, finding places to hide in the earth because their ancestry, their oral traditions, the painting on the rocks, ancient stories, all told them that they emerged from underneath the ground the last time the earth was wiped clean. Or at least one of those times. So these oral traditions keep passing on, and it's very strange that some of the most powerful governments in the world, going back to, I would say 1933, if you know what I'm saying, went all around the world and investigated these subterranean stories, people that claim to have come from these lost lands like Lemuria and Atlantis, and they went to all these places, they dug up things, they accumulated knowledge, and then on top of that, you have these same militaries building massive amounts of subterranean bunkers. As you know, the Workers' Party of Germany there built lots of subterranean stuff, and then most of those people moved out here to New Mexico, where I live, where you also have a continuation of subterranean building from where I live in Alamogordo at Holloman Air Force Base, all the way north through Los Alamos, up to Dulce, back over to Crestone, out to Area 51. and then back over to around where you're at, where they have lots of limestone caverns that they've dug out to save things, all of the things from civilization. They've been working on this for decades and decades. So you know that the power elite, actual people at the top know exactly the cycle. They know exactly what to expect. They know the side effects of it. They've managed this point in history, I think, before. And what's really scary is the fact that we'll never know who's at the top of the pyramid because of the form of world government we have is so compartmentalized that even the people you recognize as being the top of the elite, I have a feeling, are on one of the bottom rungs of the pyramid. Proverbial speaking, and literally.
Yeah, they'd be on the bottom rungs of their own top 1% of the pyramid up there. Because again, it comes back to that movie that I've seen that it hit home to me for some reason I felt was the truth. This movie, it was a sci-fi movie called Jupiter Ascending.
Yeah.
And I will absolutely, to this day, believe that they released the truth through a sci-fi film. That the rulers of this planet are not even on the planet, that they're from another, Jupiter was the largest planet. And again, if you look at Saturn through the mists across this planet, the Saturn worship, it seems like a lot of the occultists and a lot of this kind of what you're talking about, the 1% at the top of the pyramid, the 1/10 of 1%, they're all focused on Saturn. They're focused on Jupiter, but mainly Saturn. So you got to realize, you kind of understand, maybe they were using Jupiter ascending, but truly that same society was on Saturn ascending. They just want one planet over. But whatever it is, or all the messages is, you're a farmed race here on this earth as a farm, and you produce goods that are used, mainly gold and other types of things. I think it's more vibration frequency as a feeding trough for a lot of other either interdimensional entities or something that's coming here as a feeding event right now, feeding on the frequency that we're putting off. Because you got to think about it. Sharks can smell blood a mile away. Like you put 1 or 2 drops of blood in the water and they can smell it from a mile away. I don't know. That's probably the average. Think about on our planet right now, the vibration we're putting out. What kind of entities are sensing that and coming here to feed as well? Because whether it's a great white coming in on a whale carcass, or it's the human race vibrating in a COVID lockdown, schizophrenic, polar wander, hemispheres of our brains not working correctly, our stuns stepping down, the vibration frequency field of the humans so disconnected right now that it's got to be sending this scattered morphic energy everywhere that just makes, and if you're a feeding entity that dives in and can gorge on this type of hostile energies, and that's your food source. I mean, we got to be surrounded by billions of things coming in to vampire off our off the energies being put out here right now. So what is science fiction in these movies that we're seeing versus the truth that our world is? Because going back to the more ancient traditions, they talked about these archons and all these kind of things that have been here trying to control, but because the frequency field went out of sync, it allowed them more power to then put this, I guess, energetic chains across the human race at the moment. Maybe that's a little too weird and woo-woo to talk about, but it's either inner Earth or off planet. Something's here, and we're going just through another cycle, and you got to get ready for these changes here. If you're going to want to make it through, you're going to have to get with your communities and just start getting ready.
I thought
is that too woo-woo, Ransom? I don't know.
No, it's not too woo-woo. And what's bizarre about that is when you think about the history of our satellites that go out there. Wasn't it? I don't remember if it was Voyager 1 or Voyager 2 that right whenever it was going around Saturn, it just shut off and blacked out, and they couldn't get any information from around Saturn. Supposedly until it was pretty far away, and then it resumed taking pictures of it and they fixed the glitch. I always thought that was pretty bizarre. I don't know if it was 1980, maybe 86. I'm not sure when it was when it went by, but right when it was going by, it turned off. Like if, maybe there was something there that we weren't supposed to see. And it seems like every time NASA discovers stuff, I've been joking for years about how come there's not a drone on there giving us high def footage, and then all of a sudden, supposedly they are. But I guarantee you, you're not going to get any interesting pictures back. What you're going to get is a slow dripped feed of hopes for disclosure, because I'm positive that's where we're going when the planet goes nuts. Is they're going to throw aliens in the mix to totally distract everyone, and it'll be a reason that you're supposed to follow them for protection and for guidance and for food and for safety, because they've already set up this bizarre system of interdependence on the government and food supply. And I hope it's not like that Twilight Zone show where we all get on the ships and then finally somebody translates the book about how to cook human there at the end.
Yeah, if there's an alien invasion, you know, that means the elite are heading underground, and that's the major distraction while they all disappear, because the event's truly inbound, whether it be a cometary bombardment, a comet tail, with the plasma discharge across the planet, or we're coming into some sort of interplanetary lightning bolt discharge that created the Grand Canyon and the Adriatic Sea. You know, something like that is the point where they're disappearing and everybody else is left out here. You know what you meant when you kicked on the Voyager spacecraft there? It reminded me about two things. It connected that inner Earth thing with this. Because when Voyager went out and it hit the bow shock here of where the termination point is from the magnetic field from the sun going out in interstellar space, it seems that the satellite got bogged down there and it could barely move through. It was like moving an inch a day to try to get through the medium between that interstellar space that really, I don't know, there was some kind of dense medium there where it could barely penetrate through. The same thing in Russia, the deepest hole ever drilled in the Earth at 12.5 miles, I think, is the depth. They hit the same thing where they could barely drill through it. It couldn't barely even drill through. They couldn't, and they had to stop drilling because they couldn't. It was like an inch a day there before they were, you know, like regular oil wells, making feet a day, tens of feet a day, 100 feet a day. And then suddenly they hit that point at like 12.5 miles under the Earth where they could only do like an inch, half an inch a day. And the same thing, bow shock. Ransom Godwin, 420 Freedomist Films. Thank you for joining tonight. I'm host David Dubine as well. We'll see you next week. I hope your mind expanded a little bit during this time. Please prepare, grow your own food. Thanks, Ransom.
Cool. Peace. Sweet. So I hope you enjoyed this evening's mini Ice Age Conversations, brought to you by David Dubine at Adapt 2030. Please check out the also other channel that he's opened up, the Mini Ice Age Conversations, where you'll see these broadcasts with many, many more. But the only way to get the uncensored version live is either right here or on freedomslips.com every Thursday at 10 o'clock, or on 420 TV right here every Thursday at 8 Mountain High Time. The time is 4:20. And it's partly cloudy, at least it's going to be for me. Peace out, and thanks for watching.